This enhanced due diligence process is intended, so we'll receive this report, and we'll go back and forth. What our experience has been, my colleague Masood Hassan, who's sitting right here, has just gone through this for a project in South Africa. I've done a similar thing in India. There's a lot of back and forth with the project to make sure, because we don't have a long track record, so we can't just wave a report out and say, this is what you should give us. But there's a lot of back and forth to develop and assure that the greenhouse gas study is adequate to provide us and our board the information required to make a decision as to whether to proceed. Important point here is that, and this was one of the big changes for us in Exim, it created a two-phase due diligence process within the bank. This enhanced due diligence with respect to greenhouse gas is to happen prior to any significant legal, financial, the more broad environmental or technical analysis, basically before there's a large commitment of resources on the part of the bank or the sponsors to address our normal due diligence, just to say if this project is a project proposed to us produces too much greenhouse gas, something we can't live with, let's not waste everybody's energy and money. And that's what the intention here. So we generally refer to it as the early enhanced due diligence process. What happens is after we're comfortable, the technical and environmental staff is comfortable with the information in the greenhouse gas study, we'll prepare our own recommendations memo to our board, and then the board will review that. There's been some very heartfelt conversations in some of these board meetings talking about, where are we, what is this, what are the implications of this, is there anything else that can be done? They actually read these fairly highly technical analyses quite carefully. And they have basically three choices they can make. The decision here is whether to proceed or not. And there's sort of three versions of that. They can proceed onto the full due diligence, including the legal, the financial, all the things that we normally would do. They can impose conditions on that and say, you can proceed with this so long as you have this, requirements, and I have an example of that at the end here. Or they can decide, no, this project is going to produce just too much greenhouse gas for us to live with. It exceeds our 850 gram per kilowatt hour threshold, and there's not a suitable, verifiable offsetting activity. And then, so when that decision's made, assuming that we can proceed in some way, then we will just continue on, incorporate whatever conditions may come, that may be handed to us. And if they vote no, we basically, the application is rejected and we go home. We have two examples, as I said, two examples. The first one that came, actually, if you think back to the milestone, Exim Bank had not received an application for a coal-fired power plant in 10 years, when in 2009 we received one, and then we got a second one early this year from projects in India and South Africa. So all of a sudden we have two of them before us, and we're in the midst of formulating our policy. So the Sasan Ultra Mega Power Plant project in Madhya Pradesh, India, is a supercritical, it's a 3,960, just under 4,000 megawatt project. It's one of, I believe, the last count I recall, India has identified 9 to 12 of these enormous coal-fired power plants. And this particular plant, the greenhouse gas emissions for the plant as well as the mine, and again, principally the mine greenhouse gas contribution is from degassing of methane through the mining process. So, and this one was 26.4 million tons of greenhouse gas CO2 equivalent. The carbon intensity there for that mine was 830 grams CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. This one has gone to the board for approval of financing. We haven't completed the closing documents yet. But this is one project in which the board said we could proceed with financing or proceed with the due diligence so long as there's a condition to the loan, loan agreement, that assures that they will not operate at any time above the 850 gram per kilowatt hour standard. This is nominally 830. All of these have some uncertainty with it. Our estimate was this would be plus or minus 10% or so. So that would mean if they were on the upper end of that, conceivably could run above that 850. So and we haven't completed our loan documents at this point. We have a framework agreement on how to approach this. It involves monitoring of principally CO2, monitoring on, and it's a 6-unit power plant, so there'd be involved, of each individual power plant unit. One of the things we're going to have to come to closure on is a definition of exceedance. I mean, we're not interested in if there's a hiccup in some operational consideration and it goes to 860 for a day or even a week, we want to consider that a violation of this, but that means it begs the question of what is an exceedance of that threshold. So we're grappling with that. We're thinking of something on the order of 60 to 90 days. And as soon as it's noted, again, they will be doing continuous monitoring of the emissions as well as some other, CO2 as well as other emissions parameters. The second project is a very large project. I think to our knowledge it's the largest coal-fired power plant, certainly that we've seen and that we're aware of in the world. 4,800 megawatt pulverized supercritical coal-fired power plant in South Africa. It's estimated to, and I think this has actually been refined a little bit, but approximately 30 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year from the plant and the associated mine. On this one, the coal quality and the efficiency of the plant itself are better, and it is expected to produce about 798 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. This project has been approved by our board to proceed with the full due diligence, but it hasn't. They haven't gone back to the board for assessment of or a decision on whether or not to proceed with financing. Okay, that's what I have. Thank you, and be happy to take any questions.
And again, we'll take 1 to 2 questions. Start about, yeah, go ahead and come on over. You can go first and then follow up second. Thank you.
Hi, Leora Falk, Daily Environment Report. This is a clarification question, I guess. Mm-hmm. So what happens if you're in the monitoring stage, you've approved the deal, and it goes over 850 grams per kilowatt hour? Or does the deal, you stop financing, you stop offering funding? What?
Right, okay. Yes, well, first off, we're going to have to define what that means and what generally, as with any departure from a requirement, we're not interested in just shutting down a project, we're trying to get them to get back into compliance with what they agreed to. So that what we will, and again, we have a framework for that. That's what's anticipated. It'd be, if it's 1 unit of the 6, we, look for whatever option, operational or other options are to get back in compliance. So having said all of that, if they remain out of compliance with that agreed commitment to stay below 850 grams, then it would trigger whatever mechanisms in the loan agreement for going into default. So that could be, and again, those tend to be set up to escalate. But ultimately, you could call a loan. It would trigger the normal default mechanisms that are in the loan agreement.
Yes, Rob Verheem with the Netherlands Commission for Environmental Assessment. First, a comment. The great thing about this specific conference is that so many sectors show up that typically we don't see at impact assessment meetings. So that's really great. It's something we need. It does, however, for me, always raise 2 questions. When I listened, for example, yesterday to the insurance company or the private sector this morning, or you now, I think it's pretty impressive. So that's good news. But it raises the question with me, maybe you can say something about how representative, are you within your own sector? Are we having here the sustainability avant-garde, or is this very broad policies within your sector? What is the risk if you have these policies that the clients will simply go to the other people that don't have them? So that would be one question. And I would assume typically that those people that are courageous enough to come to impact assessment meetings probably are maybe a little bit greener than the rest, but I'm just curious. Secondly is, I'm from this other planet, which is called people doing EIAs. I noticed, for example, from your presentation, Stephen, that you use other tools, like you have a GHG report or full social and environmental reviews. And many things I saw there that I think, hey, that's what I do. That's also stuff you find in EIAs. Could you say something, actually these are questions both for Stephen and Diane. Could you say something about, does EIA play a role at all? Could it play a role if it would be a little bit different? Or it plays a role and it's perfect, it's hunky-dory, we can all be happy? It's like, could you say something about these two things?
Sure. Start with the second one first, which is, and I should thank you for saying that, because it was the greenhouse gas study, should we proceed, is considered part of the EIA. And I mean, when we first started thinking about what should go in such a report, we started with the Performance Standard 3 information, basically what's there. And then we said, well, we need to have, a lot of times they just give us a number and we don't really know. I'll ask the engineers to look at that a little bit and, do we really, believe this? Well, now we expect a higher level of demonstration that shows that we, what's the quality of the coal? What are the specs, some detailed specs on their boilers and the other equipment. So we really get some answers. When it's all said and done, and if we proceed, and it would be considered part of the, as I said, the EIA, that would be subject to under the OECD agreements, it's 30 days disclosure prior to taking of a board decision. So yes, it's a part of it. And we haven't faced this yet where if we said no, what would we do with that? We presumably wouldn't disclose because it would say no. What was your, I'm sorry, what the first question was? Yes, yes. Okay, with respect to ECAs, other export credit agencies, as I said, we did this in March and we were the first one to do it. So I think it's fair to say it's not going on elsewhere. And so in that sense, Ex-Im Bank is out ahead of our closest competitors, if you will. That has upsides and downsides. So far, we haven't been told that our Annex G, the supplemental requirements that were just added in March, has caused anyone to not come to us. Of course, we may not hear something like that, but to our knowledge, that hasn't occurred.